Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is a channel that's dedicated to not just talking about narcissists, narcissistic traits, covert narcissists, but it's also focused on healing, recovering from this type of emotional manipulation. So today I wanted to talk about how narcissistic abuse creates CPTSD in people. That being said, let's dive in. For those that don't know me, my name is Michelle. I'm a survivor myself of narcissistic abuse. I'm also a trauma-informed coach, a somatic experiencing practitioner, and the founder of the Thrivers School of Transformation, which is a live monthly membership where we meet together on Zoom and we work through the CPTSD recovery together. Okay, so what exactly is CPTSD? You might be familiar with PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, where somebody has or experiences something really traumatic. And it could be a one-time thing and it alters their personality from there on in, or I should say it alters their nervous system. And what I mean by that is, let's say somebody got into a car accident, because a car accident can cause PTSD, and it was an extremely traumatic event. The person with PTSD then has difficulty either driving or even being a passenger in a car because their nervous system has now associated that with danger and it's kind of stuck in that story. PTSD can come about with one traumatic event. CPTSD is a bit harder to identify because it's not like it's one huge thing. And especially when you think about covert abuse can be so subtle. It can be so under the radar that you don't even realize what it's doing to your nervous system. It's kind of like when you're standing in the ocean and you're just enjoying yourself and the waves are coming and going. You get out of the water and there's no indication that you're a mile away from where all of your stuff is on the beach because it was so subtle and so gentle that you drifted without even realizing it. Something similar happens with covert abuse. It's difficult to spot. And then if you talk to somebody about it that doesn't understand it, it can be even more invalidating and cause you to doubt yourself even more. For example, think of water torture, Chinese water torture, right? Where it was one drop of water consistently dropped on your forehead. One drop of water is nothing, right? Can you imagine going up to somebody and being like, oh my goodness, it was horrible. Like a drop of water hit my head. People would look at you if they didn't understand what happens to you over a long period of time, that one drop of water, they'll look at you like you're crazy. But the reality is, over a long period of time, it feels like there's a hole, like it's creating a crater-like hole in your head. Psychologically, that's what it feels like. But you tell somebody, they're like, oh my God, big deal. It's just a drop of water. Get over it. And sometimes that's what it can feel like when you're trying to talk about narcissistic abuse and you're explaining the covert things that the narcissist did. People can look at you like that's not a big deal, when in fact it is. And it's a big deal because of the chronic consistency of the manipulation. It really takes a toll on your nervous system, which is why we use the phrase, there's tons of videos when you're talking about narcissistic abuse about walking on eggshells. Well, what exactly does it mean to be walking on eggshells? It means you don't feel safe in the moment. You don't feel safe to just be. You have to be alert all the time because something bad is going to happen. When you're like that, it means your nervous system is on alert. Your alarm system of your body, your limbic network of your brain is on alert. Kind of like if you have a home alarm and your alarm is blaring 24/7, not because there's something going on, but there's a malfunction. It was constantly being played with for so long that it's stuck in the on position. That's kind of what happens with narcissistic abuse and what it does to our nervous system, which creates complex PTSD. And so, by definition, CPTSD is a mental condition that can develop due to long-term or chronic stress and trauma. Now, narcissistic abuse causes CPTSD, but it's not the only thing that causes CPTSD. It can be caused by physical abuse, sexual abuse. It can be the result of being a victim of domestic violence, of living in a community where there is frequent violence, where your nervous system, situations where your nervous system is chronically activated and put into high alert. Some symptoms that you may have CPTSD if you're in a relationship with somebody, by the way, who may or may not be a narcissist, because sometimes we get hung up on that label, right? And we're trying to figure out if that label fits that person, which is understandable. We're trying to make sense out of a very chaotic situation. However, putting that label aside, something that's helpful is looking at yourself and what it's doing to you. And what I mean by that is if this person is toxic, whether they're a narcissist or not, but they're toxic, you're going to start seeing changes in yourself. So some of the things you'll notice, let's say you used to have a very short fuse. You were very laid back. You didn't get angry easily. Now your anger can be set off easily. Your reactions are super high. You're no longer that calm, laid back person. You're on edge all the time. Maybe in the past you used to have a lot of passion, a lot of excitement, a lot of creativity, and now you're numb and you feel like you're walking through life like a tomb, like there's nothing inside, disconnected, dissociated. Some of the characteristics that you might notice in yourself is a chronic state of confusion where you're like, is this normal that I'm upset? What's going on? Why? Maybe it is me. There's this inability to feel grounded in your own reality. And you'll probably be experiencing brain fog. So what does recovery look like? I really want to talk about this for a few minutes. So when it comes to CPTSD caused by narcissistic abuse, there's multiple layers, right? The first layer is often figuring out that you're in a relationship with a narcissist. That's super important because it's very much like if somebody's poisoning my food and I'm trying to be healthy, if I really want to see results, no matter what I do, the first thing I have to do is remove the poison and take steps to protect myself from that person. So that's the first step with CPTSD caused by narcissistic abuse is realizing what you're dealing with and really starting to uncover and notice how this person is intentionally wreaking havoc with your nervous system. Narcissistic relationships are enmeshed relationships. There's no boundaries as to where one person ends and the other begins. You're not allowed to have boundaries with yourself. And so the next step is about starting to learn your boundaries, starting to break out of the enmeshment so that you can see the narcissist as a separate person as yourself. And I know you might be like, I see the narcissist separate. They don't see me as separate. Well, unconsciously, they train you to see them how they see you. And that's a whole nother topic. I'll make a video on that. But we have to start breaking out of that enmeshment. Once we do that, I think sometimes we think, I'm healed. Maybe I changed the relationship or I'm very boundaried and I protect myself and that person doesn't have the same power over me or we're no contact. There's so many different scenarios that can take place regardless of where you are with the narcissist. You may have broken out of the narcissistic abuse piece, but the next piece is the CPTSD part. And here are the 5 main components of CPTSD that we have to work through, even if we no longer have any narcissists in our life. Because if we don't do this work to overcome the CPTSD part, we are susceptible to either falling for another narcissist or going back to somebody or just staying in a state of something happened to me and I'm no longer myself and I can't seem to get myself back, right? We stay stuck. So here are the 5 main components. The first one, and in no special order, but the first one is toxic shame. Toxic shame being there's something wrong with me, feeling fundamentally flawed. Now, you think of narcissistic abuse, narcissists on an unconscious level know there's something wrong with them. But rather than dealing with their wound, they fling it on their family members or their significant others. We wind up soaking up that shame wound. Healing is about changing the beliefs that keep toxic shame alive. It's a faulty belief system that narcissistic abuse creates in you. And then we have to remove it. It's like a virus on a computer. We have to remove that virus so the computer functions properly. Well, we have to do that with ourselves as well, with our subconscious beliefs. Social anxiety is another component. And there's obviously different levels. You can have agoraphobia. You can have major panic attacks, isolate from people because you just can't be around people. Or you can be on the other extreme where you can be around people easily, but you're never fully you. You're afraid to be fully authentic. And so you find yourself people pleasing and in a fawn trauma response in order to feel a measure of safety. So either level is still social anxiety, and it's something that we need to work through in order to heal from CPTSD. 3 is a harsh inner critic or an outer critic. So we tend to internalize how we're spoken to. Every inner voice was once an outer voice. And if we had somebody that chronically criticized, abused, never let us see any good in ourselves, when we start paying attention to how we treat ourselves and how we talk to ourselves, I know with myself, I found that I was just as bad. I was just as bad to myself, not to anyone else, but to myself as the narcissist was. And so we need to change that inner dialogue in order to really fully recover from CPTSD. Self-abandonment is another one. Even in an adult relationship with a narcissist, if you, let's say you had a good enough childhood and you just happen to get sucked into a relationship with a narcissist, they are chronically abandoning you emotionally. If you feel something, no, you didn't feel that, or you're too sensitive, or you just want to fight. And there's always a problem with your emotions. They're always wrong. And the narcissist never emotionally supports you. Now imagine if in childhood you had the same thing from a parent. Now you have a lifetime and decades of emotional abandonment. So when you start working through the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, you're going to come face to face with a lot of emotions that you have had to suppress to survive. You couldn't feel angry. You couldn't feel sad. You couldn't mention what was going on. You couldn't stand up for yourself. Well, all the things you couldn't do, they didn't evaporate. They got stifled into your body. And as you start this recovery journey, you start coming face to face with a lot of uncomfortable emotions. We start coming face to face with the coping skills that we've used for a long time. Coping skills like avoidance of what's inside. We get really busy, right? So now we're in a flight response. We're trying to do so that we don't feel. Or we disconnect. We go into a freeze and we dissociate. We're like scrolling, we're watching TV, we're disconnecting. Either way, we're abandoning the emotions that are there that need our attention. So we really need to learn how to be there for those uncomfortable emotions. And then the last one is emotional flashbacks. You think of PTSD. PTSD has flashbacks and they're often visual. So going back to my example with the car, let's say I have PTSD from a car accident and now I'm in the passenger seat and my whole nervous system's all activated. I know why my nervous system is activated because I'm like, oh, car, it's reminding me of this. And I clearly see why my nervous system is like that. CPTSD flashbacks are so much harder to identify because oftentimes there's no visual component. At times there can be, but more often they're not. They are emotional flashbacks where an emotion gets kicked on because of something that our nervous system is deeming similar to a trauma or part of a trauma that we experienced in the past. And now we're going through this panic. And here's the scary thing, guys. Like this is the hard part. Had I not gone through it myself, I think I'd have a hard time understanding it. But our nervous system can get set off by things so subtle like a color. It could get set off by a facial expression. It can get set off by it can get set off by a tone of voice, by a smell. So we're not consciously thinking of the trauma. We're like having a great day and all of a sudden we're in panic because our nervous system saw something slightly reminding it of something that happened in the past, and now we're in a full-blown panic attack. That's an emotional flashback, and they're in our body because of the trauma that we endured. Our nervous system creates paired associations or overcouplings, and there's stories that are stuck in our nervous system that don't go away with time. Those are the 5 components of CPTSD that we have to work through if we really want to feel untouched by the narcissistic abuse of the past, where we really want to feel free of our past. We have to work through those things. And then on top of it, narcissistic abuse really disrupts your nervous system. And just to explain it really clearly, so when we are not in our trauma responses, we're in our prefrontal cortex. Right? That's like the CEO of our brain. This is like our decision making, our executive functioning. Think of it like the driver of the automobile. They're in control of the automobile. Well, our automobile, our body, we want our prefrontal cortex behind the driver's seat. When we have CPTSD, we're not here. we're in our midbrain. So if you put your fingers in your ears and they're able to touch, that's your survival area of your brain. That's your limbic network. That's your alarm system. So who's in your driver's seat of your life? Either your fight response, your flight, your freeze, or your fawn. And sometimes after long-term narcissistic abuse, we feel like that's what we're doing, right? We're living in a chronic fight response. Then we're flung into freeze. Then we're fawning. And we're never really present in our body. So if you're thinking, oh my God, like that's a lot of work to have to overcome narcissistic abuse, you're right. Narcissistic abuse is extremely damaging on so many levels. Healing involves working through all of those things. It's not an overnight thing. It's not a quick fix. But when you work with your mind and your body together, you can get you back and you can come back home into your body. Because I know with myself, after narcissistic abuse, I wasn't even comfortable in my own skin. I didn't feel at home in my body. I couldn't even relax. And then I just felt like I was existing and my life was passing me by. And who wants that? It's bad enough to have to go through narcissistic abuse, but then to be stuck in those consequences of the abuse, no one deserves that. So I encourage you to not give up, to do the inner work. I want to invite you, if my videos resonate, come join me live in Thriver School of Transformation, because that's what we do. We do the work together. Every month we have a different theme in the School of Transformation. This month in February, we're finishing up on rewiring the nervous system. In March, we are doing relationships, and we're doing 4 topics under relationships. It's going to be boundaries, the drama triangle, empaths and narcissists, and finally codependency, which is going to be open to the public and free. But come join me. And then in April, we're going to be doing somatic parts work. So again, if my videos resonate and yet you still feel like you're struggling, make sure you come check us out live.